This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by Isotope, Native Instruments, Roswell Pro Audio, and Atom Audio. You're hearing my voice right now through the beautiful Roswell Pro Audio Aztec tube microphone, mixed through Isotope, Ozone, RX, and Neutron, all on Atom Audio monitors and headphones. Please check out our awesome sponsors using the links in the show notes. Also, please remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel because it's a great way for you to help support this show. Now get ready to rock.
Like, all the ways that I've learned the most in recording has always been from, like, when I got to work with, like, Andy Wallace or Chris Lord-Alge or Jack Joseph Puig or Al Beanie or any of those. All of those have been moments where I'm like, oh, dude, you know, and then I go home and I implement whatever I've watched them do. And it's like my recordings or mixings got 30% better overnight.
Wow.
You know, as opposed to, like, when you start and you're like, how do you do this? I don't know. Let's read a book. Let's go on Gear Sluts or, you know, whatever, like that
the
kind
guy
of
at
thing.
the music store said,
just, yeah, I mean, and I'm all for experimentation. You figure things out on your own. But if you can, book yourself a session with, like, one of the best in the industry. Like, have him mix a song and sit in. Have him record a song if you can get it. You know, like, You'll learn a ton from people that are better than you.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Native Instruments introduces the new Complete 15 bundle, featuring Contact 8, offering versatile synths, sampled instruments, and innovative effects. Perfect for creating everything from emotional scores to dance floor grooves. Contact 8 includes exciting new creative tools like chords and phrases for inspiration, the Leap tool for dynamic looping, and Conflux, a hybrid instrument blending organic and synth sounds. The Complete 15 bundle also includes updated Massive X and Guitar Rig 7 Pro and AI-enhanced Isotope Ozone 11. Use the code ROCK10 for 10% off at nativeinstruments.com. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Jason Livermore, who got his first snare drum at just 3 years old and eventually picked up guitar and bass, but found his way back to drums, which he loved most. In junior high, he discovered punk rock with Milo Goes to College as his first vinyl purchase. That's awesome. I love the original bio said, like, the infamous.
Yeah.
That's great. Jason played in bands through high school and college, even recording some of them himself. And after college, he realized that recording would be a better path than selling beer for Miller. When ALL opened the Blasting Room in Fort Collins in 1994, Jason jumped at the opportunity and has been a key part of the studio ever since. In 2015, he became co-owner alongside Bill Stevenson, working on about 95% of the albums from the studio, including producing the Latin GRAMMY-winning record Solo de Lira in 2023. That's awesome, man. Congrats on that, dude.
Thank you.
Jason has also played drums for bands like Wretch Like Me, Drag the River, Bill the Welder, City Missionaries, and the Virginia Sisters. And I want to give a special thank you and a shout out to Brian Murphy for connecting us and making this interview possible. So please welcome Jason Livermore to Recording Studio Rockstars. Jason, the patient man in Colorado. Are you ready to rock, dude?
I'm ready. I'm ready to rock.
Awesome. I always like to joke. This is the one podcast where we can actually talk about the hoops that we have to jump through to get it rolling at the beginning.
Yeah, right.
Because everybody wants to know. It's like the challenge of just hooking up a microphone into a computer and having it go to the internet and all that is kind of
I can make
ridiculous.
a record, but I can't hook up a mic to a computer. It's, you know,
Exactly.
it's fun. Yeah.
Exactly. It's an unexpected challenge. I think it's a sign of being really good. I think that's what it is. The better you are, the harder it is to do that at the beginning.
Little things. I have people for that now.
Exactly. Well, welcome to the show, dude. I
Thank you.
kind of gave the brief bio there. Would you like to tell us just a little bit in your own words, just maybe the brief arc of, going through music and being where you are now? I mean, as a Grammy winner at an awesome studio, make a lot of cool records.
How did I get here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the bio was obviously the very short, condensed version, but sort of how it happened. When I was in college, I was playing in bands, and we had gotten a manager, and he also managed the band All. So I had met two of the guys in the band when I was living in.
Apologies, I called it ALL because I wasn't sure if I was supposed to say that.
No,
It.
it's the band's called All.
Great.
So yeah. And so I had met Bill Stevenson and Stephen Edgerton. They were like the two guys, the guitar player and drummer of All, and they would do recordings of their own. They were like producers, so they were up in Seattle making records for some people, and I had met them because my roommate and my manager of my band, his name was Don Robertson. He was like the head of Century Media, I think it is now. He connected us, and they would stay at my house and stuff when they came through town. So we got to know each other. And after I was out of college for like a year, I was selling beer for Miller Brands, and I was 22 or 23, still playing in a band and recording my band in my basement and whatnot. But like, I had to wear a tie to work every day, and everybody else was between 30 and 40, which now seems very young. But back then when I was 22, I was like, I can't do this. I can't wear a tie to work every day. I'm not doing it. I got to do something else. So
that's not what you typically wear to the drum kit.
No, definitely not. Well, some gigs might, but back then it didn't happen that way. Yeah. So, Don got these guys signed to Interscope, and, they were living in Missouri at the time, and they were like, we're going to move away from Missouri, 'cause this is not that rad. And they decided to move to Colorado and build a studio with their recording budget. And he's like, I'm moving to Colorado. You want to come with me? And I'm like, yes, I think I do. So I paid off all my debts, quit my job, drove out to Fort Collins. And it was quite a shock the first time I showed up here, because I grew up and down the West Coast, mostly in California. And then I moved my way up to Oregon and Washington, where like, there's no space. You get on the highway and everything's connected, and there's people everywhere. And I got out.
That's how it feels up there. You don't sort of disappear into the forest or the fields for a while.
Yeah, not so much. So when I came here, I flew into Denver and we drove up to Fort Collins, I was like, what the fuck is this? I was just like, where am I? It was, it felt like Kansas. It feels like Kansas when you're east of Denver.
And Fort Collins is a cool spot. I've actually only been there one time. I got snowed in there once.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, taking a shuttle from, I was going to Laramie, Wyoming from, where would it have been, Boulder or Denver?
There is Boulder's there. Like there's a college there, University.
No, I mean, I would have flown in.
Oh, you would have flown into Denver. Yeah.
To Denver, right. And then we were trying to take a shuttle up to Laramie, and we got caught in a snowstorm.
Right. And you had to spend time in Fort Collins. Yeah, Fort Collins is cool.
Fort Collins.
It's grown tremendously, like everything else in Colorado has, or everywhere, I guess. But
yeah,
in the last 10 years. But yeah. So I mean, I moved here in '94 and basically was here since they built the studio. It's in an old warehouse building, which Bill and I now own after being here forever. And
so why Fort Collins? Like as a place to land and do a studio? Was there?
So their thing was like the band All, they started out in LA in Hermosa Beach, and they lived there and like basically lived in their practice room, but they would be on tour 9 months out of the year. So they didn't want to, it was too expensive. They didn't want to pay all that money. So I think Bill's dad may have owned a house in Brookfield, Missouri. And so they moved out there, and I think the rent was, like $400 a month. It was dirt cheap, but they were gone. So it didn't matter. So they lived there for a handful of years. I'm not sure the exact number, maybe 3 or 4. But had, played in Colorado and been to Fort Collins number of times and played shows and thought it was cool.
Yeah. Just a cool
Bill was
spot.
going at, yeah, Bill had met a girl who lived here also. So they were very familiar with the area.
Right.
And so they just decided they were going to move here. It was kind of like, Goldilocks in between huge LA and nothing Brookfield, Missouri. Yeah.
And then was it the kind of place where at that point in time, finding a space in a warehouse to put a studio in was like in the affordable realm? And that's part of the decision.
Highly affordable.
Yeah.
This isn't like it. It's not like a huge warehouse. It used to be like a furniture store.
Mm-hmm.
It's sizable, but so we split like a third of this building with a lady who had a furniture store, and she was the owner. And she was super cool. Like, she just let us do our own thing. And it was easy to find, and the rent was like tremendously cheap. And that's sort of how we ended up staying here as long as we did. It's not the perfect building by any means, but we've sort of DIY'd everything in here ourselves and made it work.
Yeah. Well, so one of the articles, I think it was a Westward article or something, where they were talking about the studio, and there's some great photos on there. There's this like long shot of the hallway with just a wall of amps on one side.
Yeah. That's not how it used to be, but so the guy who was helping me out earlier, Jonathan, he's incredibly talented, and he came in and he's sort of like, he has free reign to sort of do whatever projects he wants in here.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of his projects when the furniture store lady finally called it quits after 40 years of being in business. And so we took the whole building over, and we were like, okay, what do we do? Like, so we tore down, we had a hallway that separated our two businesses. We tore all of that down and decided that we didn't know who was going to be our new neighbors or what was going to go over there. So we got 30 tons of cinder block and made a brand new wall that went where the hallway used to be, but we moved it over like a foot, just to make it slightly bigger, and kind of blew out some walls in the back of our studio, and then prepared to build 2 new rooms there. But so he did all that stuff before it was just nothing. We got frames on there of tons of albums, and then that wall has French cleating, French cleat system.
Oh yeah.
So he built these like boxes that you just hang on the wall, and you can move them around.
These ones right behind me, I sort of fell into that idea too. I was like, "Ooh, the French cleat! It's such a great idea."
It's awesome, really, And so you can move those boxes around, and all the amps fit in different size boxes. You can just kind of
cool.
Move them around, put them where you want to, and it's like it's a total bonus for storage, but it looks super cool too.
I don't really know if I'm learning how to do the screen share thing, so I'll attempt to see if I can actually show a picture of that at the same time.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it'll look like here, but let's see here. That says the window. So can you see that all right? That's the shot in this article that popped up. Unfortunately, you see a mess of my browser there too, but
no, I see it.
It looks so cool. I mean,
like.
so like these are the French cleats, the boxes hanging on the walls.
Yeah, on the right where the amps are.
And the amps
and you can see the wooden, some of them have wooden boxes. They're in wooden boxes.
Yeah.
You just pull the amp out, and it's just a box with a French cleat on the back, and you can
That's a brilliant idea. Yeah. I love it. I mean, when I did the French cleat thing for the panels in my studio originally, they migrated up here to my podcast studio. But in the studio, I thought like, oh, I'm going to move them around for sessions. And then I never moved any, any panels anywhere. Like they just went up and
But when you want to move though, like at least you can take them off. You don't have to unscrew them and whatnot, Right.
But with these amps and boxes, I can see how you might actually need to rearrange things. And you're like,
they probably honestly don't get moved that much, but it was a cool idea. You can move them.
Well, and also they are solid and they hang on the wall. You can get them into the joists really easily, the studs rather. And then it gives the boxes a lot of strength as they hang on that.
There's a lot of strength. Yeah. Yeah. Jonathan was like jumping around on the boxes after he built them like he was a cat, like from one to the other. I'm like, don't do that. He's like, no, they're super strong. See? I'm like,
that's hilarious.
You're crazy, dude.
That's great. That's great. Okay, cool. Well, so beautiful studio. Do you want to describe a little bit of the layout of the rooms and the spaces in there? Is it one control room and studio space, or is it multiple?
Multiple, yeah. So when we first started, there was one studio, which is called the A room now. And when we started that, when we first opened, we had a 24-track Atari MTR-90 version 3 tape machine and a Mackie 32x8 mixing console. And we had
the old classic Mackie. That was the first studio I was in too. I loved 94, that sound actually.
94. So, it was like the cheapest way you could get in. And then we had like a 4-channel red Focusrite pre and a 2-channel Focusrite ISA 215. And essentially that was it. I mean, maybe we had some like drummer gates and like.
And what were you guys recording to at that point too?
2-inch tape. Yeah. To the Atari tape machine. Right. Yeah. So we went to the tape machine till like 2001 maybe. And then we switched over to Pro Tools. But so that was our main room. And I think, so if we're going in order here, 96, the Descendants. So if you're not familiar with the two bands, so there's a band called All, and they're the guys that started the studio.
Yeah.
And there's a band called the Descendants. So they're the same musicians with different singers. So Descendants got back together after like a few years later, and they were going to make another record, and we made a record. And so we had Andy Wallace mix that record out in New York.
Oh, cool.
And he mixed it on a SSL 4000E. And that's all the gear he used. He didn't, he had like one delay and 2 reverbs, and, that literally was it. Like, he doesn't use any outboard gear.
And was that for you, was that a first time experiencing that where you were like, holy shit, that sounds amazing? And
yeah. That changed my life. Mixing with Danny Wallace changed my life, hands down. But like, it changed the studio's life as well too. Because like Bill, who's like a very sort of no nonsense, no frills type of guy.
Yeah.
He's like, we need to buy an SSL. We don't need any other crap. Like, as long as we have this board, we can make whatever record we want, So in 97, we bought a 6000E that we bought refurbished from SSL that used to be Babyface's board. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. So then the studio sort of took a huge leap up from owning a legit console and whatnot. But
so these also sound like, for you guys, pretty major investments along the way too.
Yeah. Back then I was still, I wasn't like an owner back then. I was just an engineer, especially when we first started. I was almost an intern for like a year, It sort of like worked my way up. But yeah, definitely, like, Bill has always invested heavily into himself. Everything's DIY. And so, but fortunately, the Descendants, like, he took all the money that he would have gone and paid a producer or a studio, and bought the board instead.
Yeah, that was, I remember that was, and especially at that time, that was sort of almost a new idea to do something like that.
Yeah. Home studios weren't, it's not a home studio, but having a band own their own studio, not as big of a thing. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you might have had this idea that like, oh, if a band gets signed, then you take all that money and you spend it lavishly and have a good time.
Yeah.
But then there would be the bands who were like, no, we're putting this into what we need to do to keep making music. And that was always a big inspiration.
Right. Yeah. So that's pretty much what happened there. So then what happened?
So you left off at 97.
Right. 97. Yeah, you're right. Okay. So around that same time, I was in a band called Wretch Like Me, and we made our first album in the A room. And in order to pay for that album, we ended up building out a practice room in the back half of the building. Our singer was a carpenter, and we were all his slaves, and we'd go and steal carpet behind, carpet stores and had to use as insulation and whatnot. Like, just got random crap.
Wait, did you say the singer was a carpenter or a carpenter?
No, he was a carpenter. but we didn't want to. We were trying to do it as
carpenters.
Yeah, no, but yeah, I know. I can see how those go together because we were stealing used carpet to use as insulation in the walls and whatnot, you know? So we built this practice room to pay off our debt instead of like using money. Like, so we built I don't want to say it's nice, but it's functional.
At Isotope, tone shaping is topping the charts. Meet the Catalyst series, Plasma, Aurora, and Cascadia. Plasma's flux saturation technology brings dynamic warmth and depth to your mix. Aurora takes spatial audio to new heights with lush adaptive reverb, while Cascadia adds exciting delays to your mix, retaining clarity through its smart unmasking feature. Get 10% off Plasma, Aurora, Cascadia, or any of the Isotope plugins with the special code ROCK10 and make your mixes rock at isotope.com.
It was
so
a nice
wait, did you do the classic move where it's like the rehearsal room is sort of sealed in and then the carpeting just gets stapled on the walls and the ceiling and the floor and all on the inside?
No, like we used it inside
the
walls instead of like insulation, you know, like which in hindsight probably was stupid, but you know, we didn't know what we were doing. But
that's how we start.
I mean, that's how you start. That's how you start. You just jump in and get going. So we built that thing, and then we had another guy who came shortly thereafter. His name was Andrew Berlin. He still works here, but this was in like 2000 or something. And he was like, I can never do anything. The A room's always full, like, you know, because we've sort of been slammed from day one here. It's just like I can't get in. So he started. We had a little like tool room next to it, and he started running his like home 4-track and whatnot in there and recording people at night through that.
That's awesome.
You know, and so it started there until maybe a year later, we're like, oh, we should just get rid of this tool room and make this a control room. So we did. Like, so we made the B room like a sort of a functioning studio. I mean, and everything in the building is kind of always, it's like every year we sort of make it better or rearrange it or, you know, change the acoustic. So everything's like, keeps getting better and better. But when it first starts, sometimes it's like, this isn't the greatest.
So in the backdrop behind you, so Rockstars, if you're listening to this online, you know, and without the video, you won't see it, but you've got like it looks like the big control room screen and a screen share. And are those like photos from the history of the studio?
Yeah,
and the bands
pretty much. Yeah. It's kind of wild when you're like, oh, look, there's me 25 years ago and I still look young. Wow. Crazy.
Nice.
Yeah. Like right there. See that one? Sweet mustache, bro.
Oh, awesome. Is that you? Wait, you with the green
That's me
hat
with the
on?
sideways hat.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, like 15
Straight
to 20
out of
years.
Brooklyn. You could take the kid out of Brooklyn. Wait, you were
yeah. I grew a sweet beard. I had it for like 3 months until like I couldn't sleep at night. It was itching my neck and I was like, I can't stand this. So I
did the crazy long beard.
So I shaved it all off and had like a nice mustache for a couple of days, and I came in and I was like, hey, check it out. I got a mustache. This is before everyone had mustache. You know, when you were stupid when you had a mustache. I did that. Went straight from big bushy beard to like motorcycle biker mustache that went down, and it actually came like an inch down right there. Yeah, there you go. And I did it for one gig, and I was like, this does not look good on me. Yeah. I pulled it off. I'm supposed to be wearing assless chaps with this or something. It was like, this is just not the right look. Yeah, I pulled it off for like 2 days. It was funny though. When I shaved the beard off, my daughter was like 14 months old. I don't know. She was real young. And I came downstairs and she's looking at me with like this disgusted look. And she's backing up like away from me. Like she goes, Dada, no. Put it back on. Mush, mash, osh. She's like crying and stuff. I'm just like, it's me. Like, she didn't like it. Like it. But yeah, that's a sidetrack there. Sorry about that. When I shaved mine off, and my daughter saw me, she had the same reaction, but she was like, 16 or something. So she could just tell me to my face, and she's like, "You look ridiculous. You look stupid." Yeah, yeah. No, my kid, she was young and she freaked out. That was super cool. Yeah. So, well, right on. So you guys, you were lucky that you picked a place to do this studio that had all this space where you could expand on it. Yeah, over the years, Exactly. And then like, so what, after 2015, when Rosie moved out of the furniture store and we took it all over, and then we're like, what can we do now? So that's when,
Oh, so you gained even more space at that point.
yeah. Yeah. Cause now we have the whole building, which is like 10,000
Are you eventually
going to
connect to my studio? You're just going to
we could
expand so far that you come across the country?
in the year 2120. Yeah. Yeah. So we're still expanding. But so the room that I'm in now is the mastering suite where I sort of mix and master all the time now.
Oh, cool.
And we were going to do that ourselves, like 100% as well. And right before we got started to actually building it, I was like, wait a second. You guys know we did those other rooms by ourselves, right? And they're cool. We made good records in there, but like, maybe we should ask somebody who really knows what's happening, you know? So we did. We interviewed like 3 different designers and ended up with the guy, John Brandt. He's on Gearspace a lot. And we paid him to design this place. He lives in Indonesia, cool. So it was all over Zoom. But yeah, he gave us all the plans, and
well, that's amazing. John, what an experience working with somebody remotely.
It was, yeah, it was
design a studio.
Yeah, we took photos and videos and gave him the dimensions, and showed him and talked to him, and he did his plan and his thing, and he's got all the trapping and stuff on his Dropbox, once you hook up with him, and where to put it and how to build it. And
then you guys did the build out yourself, or did you have to work with people? And so that would be something that he's used to as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Like if you don't know how to do it, then he can put you in touch with a contractor or something.
Wow.
So Jonathan, our guy who does everything, he also built this. And then shortly thereafter, Jonathan built another 4th studio on the other side of this wall, as well, that sort of mimics the way this studio looks and behaves. So we have four studios, 3 of which are like you can record, bands in, and then this one, which you could also record in, but it's not designed for that.
Yeah.
It's just mixing and mastering mostly. And then we also have like an editing suite, but it's basically a closet, that's got some gear and whatnot, but we do a lot of editing. The interns or assistants can work in there. So there's like sort of 5 functioning spaces in here now. Yeah. So
that's amazing.
There's like, Bill and I are the owners, and then there's Chris Biebel, Andrew Berlin, Colton Crone. Those are the 3. Well, and Bill's son now, Milo Stevenson. Those guys all engineer. And then Jonathan Luganbill, he is our do everything person. I mean, everything. He does everything. So we got all those. And then we usually have 2 interns that work for us at a time. They kind of rotate out once a year.
Yeah. So a couple of thoughts. One is there's a studio in Berry Hill called Pentaveret Studio, which is a little bit similar in that they have 5 different spaces, and it's in sort of winding through a building and a house and something else.
Yeah, it's a labyrinth.
So it's cool to have that kind of large space where you can have multiple rooms and people. And then 2 is, I guess, as far as having interns goes, what a great opportunity too, because it really gives a lot of chance to be integrated into all the different workflows and be able to help out and be super useful and feel like you're participating.
Yeah, the interns, like, we make them do a lot of stuff, but if they're paying attention, they're going to learn a shitload. There's like 4 engineers here who are all top level, and we all do things our own different ways. We share ideas and whatnot, but all of our sessions are always set up differently. And the interns, usually we're having them do mix prep for us or, whatever we need. And so they're kind of like, why do you route the drums like this? And Chris does it like that,
right.
Oh, I don't know.
Like, ask me at the lunch break.
Yeah, that's exactly
what I say. I say, write it down and ask me at lunch.
Just open the session and tinker around for a while, would you? No, but they can learn a lot. I wish that I had that. I mean, I did have that a little bit working with Bill and Stefan, but I think that we have, like, with the guys who work here now, I don't want to say we're better, but yeah.
Well, I'm sure you guys have like amassed a greater body of knowledge together
Yes.
over the
Yes.
years, you know.
Exactly. Yeah.
I can't even believe I just came out with that sentence.
I know.
Okay, cool. So now you got 5 rooms.
Yep.
You're mixing and mastering out of that room. Why don't you describe your room a little bit more for us? What are some of the tools that you're surrounded by, and like what are some of the things that help you do your work really well?
Right. Okay. So my main set of monitors behind me here are the ATC 50s. And then underneath them are a pair of, are they 18s? No, I think they're 15s. I think they're 15-inch rhythmic subs. So, and those are
a pair. So stereo
there's
subs.
a pair. Yeah. Stereo subs. Yeah. So it sounds so the design of the room is fantastic and the speakers are fantastic. So it's like an amazing, it's just so much easier to hear in here. After we
and
built
your
this,
speakers are soffit mounted; they're in the wall.
Yeah, that was part of John's design.
Was that had you experienced that already? Because it may feel like a lot of us start out getting used to near field monitors.
No. This room is like radically different than any room that I'd worked in the past. So I mean, I used to do all my work on the SSL, where I'd probably gone through 15 sets of different speakers. Right. In the course of the room, trying to figure out what I liked, and
they're all called NS10, and it's because the phone blows up.
Those were actually my least favorite, but yeah. But we still have some. But yeah, when I came in here, I was like, oh my god, I can never go back into that other room. I can't mix on that. I can't mix in that room again. It's like so much easier to hear in here. Like it's like wearing a pair of headphones. It's so completely clear and just everything. It's awesome to work in here. So those are my speakers. It
looks great. It looks amazing. And like the wood slats behind.
Yeah. The wood slats are like, they're more, I guess, like, so the whole room is basically a huge bass trap, like everywhere. There's bass trapping everywhere. Behind that wall there is like 3 feet of stuff,
Yeah.
And the slats are kind of to keep the room from getting too dead.
Right.
So a little bit reflective sort of thing, but I mean, they look cool too.
They do.
Yeah, so that's the monitoring. I have like a mastering chain of so I go D to A converter into a compressor. I've got an Allen Smart C2, and I've got a multi-band analog compressor into a couple different EQs. I've got this Terry solid state EQ. It's kind of like a Pultec / Neumann cutting lathe type EQ. I guess they pulled out the EQs from like the old Neumann cutting lathes, and Terry's using them as I think his name's Marshall Terry, using those for the mid range. And then I just picked up a new tube EQ to replace my old one. So it's a Fairman, the TM EQ. And it
that's
has
all part of the mastering chain. And mastering is, well, I should ask you this, but like, in what ways is a mastering setup and a mastering chain different from what you would do for mixing? First question. And then it's probably not even fair to say recording, because recording is just like, recording's just managing chaos, creative chaos.
Yeah. Well, for me now, they're not different. Like, so when I mix, I run everything through my mastering chain as if it was like on my master bus, sort of thing. So I tack a limiter on at the end of my capture when I'm mixing. So I'm actually,
you're delivering something that's ready for,
like, my mix is basically mastered. I can go back after the fact and alter the levels or the limiting, or, you could master it properly, but I've sort of mixed it with that in mind. So for me, this chain works functionally for both. In the past, when I mixed on a console, there was no chain. It was essentially the console into the half-inch machine or the DAT machine. Now we're in a radically different world with Pro Tools and whatnot. Like, you can do whatever the hell you want.
Well, it's cool because you get a combination. You get the if you're mixing in the box, but then going out through all this analog gear, you get that combo.
Yeah, no, it's definitely works really well to me. Because it took me a long time to give up working on the console. I didn't like working in the computer at all. It was very cumbersome for me, and I thought it sounded like hot garbage. But
that's because it did.
Because it did. It sounded like hot garbage. It was not cool at all. somewhere, I don't know how long ago, but definitely in the last, 5 to 10 years, the computer sounds respectable. And it seems like every year, like plugins keep getting way, 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 way better. So it's like, there's hardly any difference.
Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound weak and distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift for you to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding a lot more like professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins and Pro Tools. And the best part is, these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus Studio One, Reaper, or anything you can think of. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. When I was working with Steve Albini, he made a comment once about how analog had reached a pinnacle of like design, not that it's not advancing in design, but just that like it reached a shining peak,
right
after a while. And digital was relatively new, certainly was new in the 90s still, even though it had been around.
And boy, did Steve love digital.
Yeah. But now digital's had like, a good 30 years
40-ish years to figure stuff out.
Yeah, to figure stuff out. And actually there was a presentation here at AES where he was showing the history of Telarc recording, which was a digital audiophile label.
Uh-huh.
And he was playing recordings. Apologies for not having his name right in front of me, but he was playing recordings from the 1970s. That sounded incredible. And they were like the very first digital technology. So to your point, like, yeah, we have had 40 years because.
Yeah, it's been a while to figure it out, but it's definitely, I don't have any qualms working in the computer now anymore. Like I definitely did 7 years ago. I didn't want to be in the computer, but back to the mastering chain, it helps, for sure, just to have sort of here's a bunch of really rad hardware that's going to kind of glue your thing together and get you to a place fairly quickly where you're not pulling your hair out, and then
now let me ask you this, Jason. So elements of enjoying mixing. So if you're not mixing in the box, or if you weren't, then you were probably mixing on a console.
Yeah.
And with a background like yours in recording and mixing a band and trying to get a really great band sound, the console brings things like a sonic quality, that glues together and adds some control and listenability to an otherwise pretty chaotic sound. Loud rock bands are pretty chaotic when they're
for sure,
when they're doing their thing. And so I feel like a lot of capturing and mixing is about putting that into something that you can present so that you can really turn it up and enjoy it.
Yeah. I mean, there's that, but I think for me, the console was more about getting your ideas out immediately. Every channel had an EQ and a compressor and then a compressor on the whole thing. So you could just boom, go, just put your hands on 10 faders at once. And clang, 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 and move over a little bit. Clang, 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 clang. Oh, brighter, softer, louder, whatever. As quickly as you could think about it, you could just go, if you were accustomed to using a console.
Rockstar's listening now. He's waving his hands around like he's crazy. He's gone mad on the other end.
He's gone mad. I've gone mad. That's how you would, if you really wanted to work quickly, you'd just go mad.
Yeah, you want to be able to play it like you would perform music.
Pretty much, you weren't thinking, okay, what should I do to this kick drum? What EQ should I reach for? Oh, I heard the BX subfilter works great. There wasn't that. It was just it needs more bottom end. Boom, and you would just react. And that was your tool, and you twisted the knobs until you got what you wanted. But you could do it very quickly, and it was all right there. So your head wasn't in the, oh, what should we do next? Oh, what should I use for this? Oh, you were just thinking about, I need to make this sound better. Here's what I have. twist the knobs, in
Yeah.
the right way. And so that was the console. It was like really quick for me, really quick and instinctual. And we have outboard gear that you could change your mind on, obviously, but for the most part, the SSL can do everything. So you would just use that and, use what you had and not get hung up.
And that's what I've always loved about mixing on a console too. And one of there was the early studio experiences where, all 4 or 5 people in the control room have to grab different faders and mutes and perform
with
it.
The non-automated consoles.
Yeah, which was a lot of fun, and then then for me, I did the Bonnaroo studio backstage for 15 years. And that was all just, the band's performing, and in studio, I'm mixing it live to headphones. And so you're just in it, they're hearing it in the headphones. So it's like a feedback circuit and you're performing quickly.
Right.
So those are examples for me of that kind of like hands-on faders. And then when you go to the computer, you're like, all of a sudden you're like, your elbows are cramped up at your sides and you're clicking along on a mouse and you're like, what the hell?
Yeah. I forgot what I was going to do next because I've been so long trying to figure out where the mouse goes,
Yeah.
It's not like that anymore. It's like anything, the more time you spend on it, it becomes second nature. So, but the transition, I think that mixing on the console probably still could be better, than the computer, but the world has changed radically and you have to recall things years later now, or it seems like.
And then when you started mixing in the computer, did you find that digital controllers to emulate a console were helpful, or did you just kind of learn the mouse?
I just learned the mouse because we didn't have any of the controllers yet. The other guys have controllers in their other rooms, but I have one singular controller. It's that little PreSonus.
Oh yeah, right. The fader, the
one fader thing.
Fader, yeah.
And so something happened. Well, so basically, like I still enjoy automating things, with my hand.
Yeah.
So instead of drawing it in there, it's easier to do. So I'll do that with the PreSonus fader. But when you do that, in the past, it would be volume automation. And so it wouldn't do volume trim automation. So like the way I like to work, I like to do my automation and volume trim. So like I can do all these automation moves and then I can go back and grab the fader and move it up and down and change the level a little bit later without having
you might have a bunch of little moves and phrases of things, but then you can kind of do more gentle rides on top of that.
Yeah. So the reason I didn't get a big automating box is because I was like, I don't like to do volume automation. I like volume trim. So, but I just found this out like 3 days ago. You could do that, and there's a new command. Maybe it's new. Maybe I just never knew about it. But because you can't copy the volume automation and paste it onto volume trim, but now you can. There's a different command for it. So I may end up getting multiple faders now.
When it comes to things like Pro Tools, and are you in Pro Tools?
I'm in Pro Tools, yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes to that, I'm now learning Reaper, and that is like very deep. There's deep levels of stuff to learn. But what I've learned is that you're always learning stuff. It's these apps that we use are vast. They got a lot of stuff in there.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So like eventually, that's one of the great things about having interns in the studios. They show up and they're like, oh, yeah, you just click this button right here. And you're like, no way.
Yeah, no, I would be dead without the interns and and Jonathan and the other guys. Like, because I used to know how to do everything in the studio. And then it's sort of like the kids come in and they're like, oh, hey, we'll take care of that for you. You need a new plugin? I'll manage the plugin installation. It's fine. I'm like, okay, cool. Oh, hey, you need this done? I'll do that. I'm like, oh, great. So like I keep doing like less and less. And anytime I'm like, I want to get a new plugin, I go to install it. I'm like, how do I do this? Because it's all different, like all the plugin downloads and installation codes and iLock managers and all this. I'm just, Jonathan, like, and he'll come in and he'll just like do it all. I'm just like, I don't know.
That's
kind of like,
That's awesome. Well, when we connect our studios, I'll make sure there's good coffee here for Jonathan.
Yeah, good.
Okay, cool. So let's see, where does that bring us to? So you guys, you've got your room.
Got my
You're mixing and mastering in there. What about playing music? Are you still sitting down at the drum kit and rocking out?
I still sit down at the drum kit and rock out a little bit. I play on recordings a couple times a year. Usually, like if a singer-songwriter or a band comes in or something and their drummer's not here, I'll kind of like, hey, you guys need anything? You know, kind of thing. Like play a little bit like that. I had an unfortunate thing happen with my neck.
It's called a career in recording engineering.
I had to get neck surgery like 7 years ago, where they took a disc out of I had a disc pressing on my spinal cord, and it was causing my arms to twitch out and whatnot. So I had to get a surgery, and they fixed it and fused some discs to get together. But after that, I was like starting to see if I could still play drums, and after about 15 or 20 minutes, my arms would start to go numb, and I'm like, oh no, I guess I'm not going to play live anymore. You know, I think I could probably pull it off now. Maybe this was just a post-surgery thing. But so, you know, when you play live, you don't stop, you know, in the studio, I could be like, okay, there's 3 minutes, give me a second, you know, like kind of thing. So I haven't played live that much at all, but
well, and the music that you come from is pretty demanding.
It's pretty demanding. Yeah. Physically demanding drums, you know, punk rock is fast and furious.
So Rockstars, I have Jason's playlist in the show notes. You can just click through and go listen. And it's like, you know, half of my questions are like, how the hell do you do drums like that? You know, when they're that intense and that high speed and there's that much going on. And, you know, it's just very, very like powerful, fast drumming.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I've also been trying to learn. So when I was young, I learned guitar and bass, neither of which I'm very good at. But I learned them, but I never learned how to play piano. So
are you teaching yourself now?
Pretty much. Yeah. I'm teaching myself how to play piano. Yeah.
I'm teaching myself how to play drums. So
are you okay?
Yeah.
And it's fun.
It's a thing that you do when you get into the studio. Once you have a studio and all of a sudden you have all these instruments, I think inevitably and eventually you're just like, all right, it's time for me to learn how to play that one. You know, I mean, don't put a pedal steel in our studios, anybody, please, because that might be the downfall of us. But
oh man,
you know, it's fun to like pick up all the different instruments. And then I think when you agree that from the perspective of the production and the engineering and the control room, you gain a much deeper understanding into how these instruments can get played. And
oh, absolutely. I mean, that was kind of like when we first started, we were all in bands, and we only recorded punk rock bands, essentially.
Yeah.
Of which myself and Bill and the other guys were like masters of, you know, so it was easy to be like, it was like half recording, half band camp, half drum lessons, you know, for everybody who came in here for a long time. Like, no, you're playing it wrong. You got to hold the stick like this. This is how to make the snare drum sound proper. Like, you know, you got to hit the rim at the same time as you hit the middle, and you got to do this with your wrist, you know, all that stuff. So like back to your point, knowing how to play the instrument gives you a radically different perspective on like whether or not it's good or what's capable.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah. Your point makes perfect sense. Although I was actually almost making the opposite point, where it's just like, you learn what the instrument's supposed to sound like in the control room. So when you pick it up for the first time, you're like, I'm just going to play, you know, a few bass notes, because I always kind of wish the bass player was playing just a few bass notes.
Oh, whatever, you know? Well, there's that too. Yeah, there's that too.
As somebody learning drums, I would probably be inclined to like go play them and be like, I am never going to hit those cymbals hard, you know?
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah. No, yeah. I just made a recording for a guy, and I wanted to do it with one microphone. So we put one mic up,
cool.
and I played, and I was like, I told the other engineer, I'm like, put some distortion, like just a little like compression on this mic in my headphones. So I kind of get scolded. You know, if I hit the cymbal too hard, I'll immediately know.
Yeah.
You know, don't do that, you know, because I didn't want to overdub the cymbals. But man, you got to play the hi-hat and the cymbals just with a feather touch. You know?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So one mic, where did you end up putting the mic? So this is for the drum part.
Yeah, so for the drum part. Like basically, like if you had a 4-piece drum set where the ride cymbal mic would be, but up about eye level. So I don't know what that would be like.
Oh, so sort of a high mic, up high a little bit.
Not terribly high. I mean, eye level when you're sitting, like above where the ride cymbal would be, facing at the snare.
Right. Okay, cool.
Yeah, about there. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
it picked everything up pretty well.
It's fun to do stuff like that. And why'd you do that? Why did you guys decide to do the one mic drum?
Because we record with like 40 mics at a time now, all the time, like multiple sets of everything, so you could figure it out later. And I just was like, well, first off, because I heard the song and I was like, this song's cool. It needs like this super little tight, like retro-y sound. Like, and I'm like, I don't want to commit. I mean, I don't want to change my mind later or any of that. Just like, let's just do one. Fuck it. Like, if it doesn't work, I'll recut them, you know,
I love it.
Like, yeah.
So, hey, I wondered, so the first artist that I recorded in my studio when I first got it, finished here, the Toy Box studio, is a guy named Jeff Finland, who I think is also.
Oh yeah. He lived here in Fort Collins.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, maybe he's not there now, but,
he might be, but
he's great. He's a great, like, you know, poet, singer, kind of songwriter.
Yeah.
But I wonder if you guys had recorded together.
Yeah. He's been here.
Awesome. Rock your music production with the updated Complete 15 bundle from Native Instruments, featuring the new Contact 8. This comprehensive collection includes a fantastic range of versatile synths, sampled instruments, and innovative studio effects, giving you everything you need to bring your music to life. Whether you're composing emotional scores, deep dance floor grooves, or experimenting with sound design, Complete 15 has you covered. Discover powerful plugins and instruments that guide you from the initial idea all the way through to the final mix. The included Contact 8 introduces exciting new tools like chords and phrases for instant inspiration, the Leap tool for dynamic looping, and Conflux, a cutting-edge hybrid instrument that merges organic and synth sounds in real time. Plus, enjoy revamped versions of Massive X and Guitar Rig 7 Pro to take your sound to the next level. Then polish your mixes off with the AI-enhanced Isotope Ozone 11 included in Complete 15 bundle. Use the code ROCK10 for 10% off at nativeinstruments.com. Howdy, rock stars. We're back now for the jam session, aka the second half of the show. My guest today is Jason Livermore, joining us from the Blasting Room in Fort Collins, Colorado. Jason, you ready to jam?
I'm ready to jam, man.
Do you guys ever jam?
We do jam sometimes. Yeah.
Like in the studio, or like even when you're doing like punk rock, or would I get thrown?
Oh, no. We used to jam a lot. We used
tossed
to jam
out of the rehearsal room for saying jam.
No. I guess it depends on what kind of punk rocker you were, but we were into like, you know, Mahavishnu Orchestra and
right on, man.
Billy Cobb, like all kinds of, you know.
Oh, hell yeah.
Complicated things. So jamming,
complicated music.
Complicated music.
What kind of stuff gets you tossed out? What do they grab you by the scruff of your neck and by the back of your belt and just like toss you out?
It's nothing anymore. We're way more accepting nowadays. Like, you know, maybe 30 years ago, if you brought in a synthesizer or something, you get tossed out. But
really, synthesizers aren't considered punk rock?
No, keyboards were not punk rock at all.
Well, now keyboards versus synthesizer, though.
Yeah, it was just synonymous, you know.
Synonymous?
Way back when.
But did you have rival punk rock synth bands that were like, you guys don't know?
There were no punk rock synth bands. New wave synth bands. Not punk rock synth bands.
Would you guys have dug a new wave synth band at the time?
Sure. That's different.
All right. I'm learning.
Yeah. Back when I was in high school, like the guys in my scene, the skaters, we were all punk rockers, and all of our girlfriends were new wavers. Like they didn't, they listened to The Cure, and we listened to Black Flag. It was
awesome,
and that's how you'd cross pollinate your genres, because you had to hang out with a girl.
And right now, my TV, my Netflix account is like suggesting 16 Candles with Molly Ringwald to me and everything.
Yeah, with the psychedelic furs.
I started to watch it a little bit too.
Oh yeah, you should. Jake Ryan.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about, let's go back there. Let's go back to punk rock a little bit and Tell us like what goes into making a great punk rock record? What are some of the things that, help a band go in, do the right thing and record it the right kind of way and mix it the right kind of way? What are some things that you learned about that? I mean, if that's too broad a question, just
I mean, it is a broad question,
narrow
but
it down.
making records is a broad topic.
Yeah. But like specifically like the punk rock thing, the fast drum beats, maybe kind of old school approach.
We haven't really taken an old school approach. We were always more of we liked Steely Dan, but let's see how much of this like hi-fi, sweet, killer sounding mixes we could apply towards punk rock.
Yeah.
That's sort of always been the way we've gone. So,
and do you think a little bit of that came from your experience with Andy Wallace too, where you're like, wow, the things he did?
Well,
or is that more like the console?
No, that's just
simplicity?
like a concept. Like Bill was into like Billy Idol, who had these like drum machine perfect records, like he was just into really good sounding records and sort of perfection. And I wasn't quite as much like that, but I definitely like stuff that whomps me, kicks my ass when I listen to it. So we haven't really been on the like record like the shitty punk rock band as shittily as possible because it's shitty punk rock. Like that's not our MO. Our MO is like, let's make this sound like as kick ass as possible, and let the music dictate the punkness of it, I suppose.
Now, is there an element as a drummer? Was there an element of getting comfortable with the idea of, and so first off, is part of making records like that mixing and matching samples and drum hits with the live recording? And if so, was there a period of you getting comfortable with that idea and then realizing that was a good way to do it or anything?
I mean, I've sort of always wanted to do that.
Okay.
I mean, I do that now, obviously.
Yeah.
I think the whole world does that now. But when we started, we were on tape and it was not easy to do that.
What did you, back then you had to use like a Wendell or something?
Well, so back then we used the Eventide. It had a sampler in it that you could fire stuff off. And
was
also
that like the H3000 had that?
Yeah, the H3500 is the one that we have. You could fire samples off of that. And you could also fire samples from the Yamaha SPX 90 or 900, one of those.
Wow.
You could load stuff in.
And I remember the AMX 16 or something.
That's the one. That's the one that Andy Wallace uses, was the AMS.
Right.
So he was firing his samples from that. So the way that like I sort of started my drum sample thing kind of after watching him, he never replaced drums at all. He would just add in, he called them ambient samples.
Mm-hmm.
So like his snare drum was like kind of a combination of a drum machine, a room sound, and white noise. It just went, bah, bah, had this really explosive sound. And he'd fire that off behind his snare drum and put reverb on that, but not put reverb on the real snare drum. The real snare drum would be for impact. So that's how he created like a controllable ambience without turning the room mics up. Because then you get a bunch of garbage behind it, room mics half the time.
Yeah.
And he did that with the kick drum too. But depending on the tempo of the song, how much you could get away with it. But it was kind of like a drum machine-y sounding kick drum that he kind of EQ'd the top end out of and then put reverb on that too. So it gave the drums depth without using room mics. I love room mics, but if it's not a good drummer, they're sort of useless.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I started getting like a more pro sound, after we got the SSL with those samples and whatnot. And then as far as like, sampling, like now I can go as far as to like using only MIDI, which I've done, no drummer, all the way down to just, the raw recorded drum set and any version in between. Like, let's just replace the snare drum entirely with the MIDI program, or, let's not, let's say, I'm not afraid to do anything now.
Right,
it's like,
but it's cool to hear you, think of examples like that, because, it might seem old hat to you, but to us listening, it might be like, oh, I didn't know you could just, do it that way or whatever.
Yeah, you can do anything. I mean, granted, I used to be a lot more biased against things like, oh no, people need to play better, and if they can't play, then they're not going to be on this album. Blah, blah, blah. Like, and then you get older, and you're like, do you want to record for a living, or do you want to be a judgmental prick? Like, like you have to like learn how to make all this stuff work. And
well, I mean, at a certain point, it'd be like being a movie maker out in in Hollywood, and you're like, we're not using a green screen. You have to learn how to walk on the surface of Mars.
Exactly, right.
Which actually, I guess, kind of worked for the new Tom Cruise movie.
Oh yeah, I have to go watch it.
Yeah. I'm just blanking on the name.
Yeah,
where they're flying the airplanes and it's all shot in the planes and everything.
But, yeah. No, I watched that. That was an okay movie. That was Top Gun Part 2 or whatever.
Yes, Maverick.
Yeah, Maverick.
And it was actually what was funny is when I went to go watch it, we showed up late, and the only 2 seats left were in the mega theater in the front row, all the way on the right.
No,
so I was like
home.
leaning back.
You have to go home.
I was gonna go home, and then I was like, oh, I'll just do it, and I lean back, and I'm looking from one corner of the screen up, and Tom Cruise's nose was like all their features were distorted, so they looked like giant comical images.
Yeah.
Which was actually a lot more fun to watch.
Maybe. Yeah, if you like to be seasick,
Yeah. All right. So doing everything from replacing one of the drums in a mix to, supporting
the whole drum.
things,
Yeah, anything like, or like now. So now there's all these different like contact drum programs, one of which we've done through a company called Room Sound. And they came in and took samples of like a few different drum sets, and you can feed your MIDI into it and, change drums and sounds and mix the whole thing in there and whatnot. So
let's break that down a little bit, if you don't mind.
Okay.
So you're talking about Native Instruments contact player.
Yeah.
And so you guys have your sample pack could be loaded up as an instrument.
That's correct. Like yeah. And you can use MIDI. And so you can so
MIDI meaning you would play it from a MIDI controller, or you would take the live drums and convert it into figuring your samples?
Take the live drums, and I use Massey DRT, and it's like a little plugin that the Massey plugin company makes, and you can spit out whatever drum you put into it into a MIDI note, right? And so then the MIDI note feeds into the contact program, and you can say, okay, this is the snare drum, or this is the kick drum, or whatever, you assign it to the program. But say you have a bad snare recording, generally it's not my first instinct to completely replace somebody's recording. Right. But like, let's say the room mics they did it in a house or something. You can send just only use the room mics, and blend them into the home recording. And so now you have real room mics through like a contact program,
right.
So like I do that a fair amount of stuff. Like the same company makes one from Kurt Ballou. He did he did a program at Electrical Audio a couple of years back, and his is fantastic. And that one's got the A room of electrical and the B room for the rooms. And the rooms are just, that's the fun part. You can add in like different people's rooms into your recording, to get a completely different color.
Yeah. And so the electrical rooms, B's the
huge
tall
one. Yeah, the real tall, like 30-foot
room.
ceiling one, and the A's the Adobe brick one.
Right. Well, but A actually has a couple of rooms. There's Kentucky, which is the medium, the mid room, and then there's center field, which is a huge wide open space.
Right.
And I wonder if they did it in both those rooms. I really liked Kentucky.
They did the drums mostly in that like little
in the mid room,
mid room where they cut most of the drums, not the big room, the middle room that's got the floor cut out around the edges.
Yeah, we actually cut rooms and drums in all 3 rooms. We had.
Oh, did you? Yeah, the dead one.
Kentucky,
super cool.
The mid one was great. The dead one, which is called Alcatraz.
Yeah, the dead one's rad.
Which was that was really cool. And I learned things. I learned like, okay, dead drums aren't necessarily what you want for like power rock, or maybe they are. But I found I discovered things like without the sound of the room, it can be tricky to hear the drums against a wall of guitars, and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
And then also recording in center field in the big wide open room without walls nearby, it can also make it hard to hear the drums because they just sort of disappear
mushy.
instantly.
Yeah, too mushy. Yeah. Yeah, unless you're Chad Blake. Chad Blake apparently cuts all of his drums in the dead room and then just distorts everything. And so that's where he gets the sustain from, like.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
awesome.
but we've got a few different versions of room here at the studio. One's like real small and completely dead.
Mm-hmm.
And it's freaking super cool because like the drums are so clear, they just come out of the speaker. It's like you can just grab the speaker and there's the snare drum. Like, you know,
that's your Steely Dan room.
That's your Steely Dan room, which is awesome. Like to have that crisp, clear clarity is amazing. Like if somebody's good, they don't need the room, as much. Like I find the room I love rooms. Rooms are excitement for drums, really. You can kind of feel the excitement, but it's like they help people sound better than they are sometimes. Like
it's almost like in a way. It's almost like singing with
reverb.
More reverb.
Like, it sounds cool, but it's like it's covering up the actual character of the drums or that person singing or whatever. You're not getting, it's like doing a doubled vocal. It's like it sounds cool, but I don't know what you actually sound like.
So are you like a super jazz drum fan, like Max Roach and Drums Unlimited and that kind of thing?
I love jazz. Yeah. I don't know like a ton about it, but I do listen to it a lot.
Yeah.
I can't play it. It's the jazz drums are difficult to play.
iZotope is truly amazing for mixing and mastering your music, like the new iZotope Plasma plugin featuring flux saturation, which helps you sculpt the harmonics in your sound, enhancing the excitement and clarity of your tracks and mixes. And Ozone, with its built-in mastering assistant, helps you analyze your mix, suggesting all the settings you need for a professionally mastered result based on your chosen style of music and EQ curve, or reference a specific song if you want. Ozone features sophisticated yet simple modules like clarity and impact, low-end focus, stabilizer, imager, exciter, and spectral shaping, along with powerful dynamic EQ, compression, and limiting, allowing you to adjust the settings to your taste so it sounds incredible. And with the magic of master rebalance, you can even manipulate the vocal, bass, and drums separately at the mastering stage. Use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off Plasma, Ozone, RX, or any of the fantastic plugins at iZotope.com. Well, cool. So let's see. So you've got the the sample packs will load up in Kontakt. You use the Massey DRT, which is it's a drum replacement tool or something.
No, it's like basically it converts what you're highlighting into MIDI.
Right.
You tell it what note you want it to be, and it spits it out as MIDI.
And then it goes onto a track, and then that track can feed the sample player, and there's your MIDI sound.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. And I think now with tools like, I can't remember, I think maybe Pro Tools does this now, and Logic, you just simply say convert to MIDI, and it'll do that too. Although I can't vouch for whether it'll make a MIDI track as accurately as the DRT one does.
Right.
And that is pretty important when you're getting into drums.
Yeah, you absolutely have to like. So we do it a different way. So we convert it's totally nerdy. Convert the kick and snare track into what we call blips. So you're just taking the first sine wave of a drum.
Yeah.
Just the first sine wave. Like if there's a little bit of chatter beforehand, not that, and nothing after, just the first up and down, and putting it onto a new track.
Yeah.
Like cutting it out and moving it down to a new track. And then when you go make MIDI, if you use that, it's 100% accurate. It's definitely a harder, a longer, more involved process, but there's because if you don't have your samples all lined up 100%, they start to phase out, and it's like, it sounds like the drum gets hollow or weird, or the guy's hitting the snare with a broken snick. Like, what happened on that one? It's like, boof, 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 kick, boof, boof. Like, what happened? You go back, the MIDI's just this much off. Like, so Yeah,
That's great.
important.
No, I
So
love
that's
that.
important.
And I actually did learn that when I was out in
Yeah.
LA. There was a guy who came over, who was somebody's assistant. It's so long ago, I don't remember, but he
Yeah.
came over to the studio we were at, and he was sitting there working on our drums, and he did that trick, and I looked at him like, "What are you doing?" It was so
Right.
that was so like deep level.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what you said. It was a process of going through each drum hit to find the first cycle of the waveform,
Pretty much.
and then you truncate everything else. You throw everything else away, and then he had a key command that was like a keyboard maestro that would just go through the whole session.
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, totally. Like tab to transient, like one little shift, and then like you'd hit like S, and it would cut everything off. Or there's I just make the interns do it now. But Tom Lord Alge sort of has a cool way to do it too. He just uses trigger. Like you put the trigger, the Slate trigger program on there and just hit render. And it basically does that same thing. But then you have to go through manually and, visually check to make sure that nothing got truncated
Right,
inaccurately.
Exactly.
So sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't.
Now, and the reason why this is crucial is because you're talking about situations where you want to blend the acoustic drum
exactly
with the sample. And so therefore you don't want a shifting of the phase of the body of the tone or the low end.
Yeah, they can't be firing off at like different times, you might as well not use it.
Whereas if you just use the sample on a situation, then you have more.
Doesn't matter then.
I
suppose it would
freedom,
definitely more freedom depending on how many more elements of the recorded drum set interact with the kick. Like if you had a front of kick mic that you liked, like that might matter a little bit if you were off, but probably not. If you remove the kick drum mic. Totally.
Okay, cool. So let's see what else about the way that you might set up to record a drum set. So let's say you had a punk rock band come in now and they just wanted to record drums. How might you set up to record that kit or record the whole band for that matter?
It depends on what they want to sound like, how fast they play.
Let's go
how much time they have.
Let's go for fast. Let's say fast and challenging.
Okay.
So that we've got some problems we have to solve.
Oh, essentially, like I would go through and pick out, like at the studio here, we probably have like 10 drum sets and 40 snares and whatever. Like I would get the ones where I knew the kick sounded good and tight and solid. Use that kick drum, and the toms that didn't ring a ton, like, without an excessive amount of taping or whatever. Like, so basically choosing the drums that work for like the end result that you want. Start there, get that, set those drums up. And then you have after you've got the thing up and you've got all your mics up, have the guy play through and try 10 different snare drums, and then come back in and when you guys listen to it together and don't tell them which one's what and be like, oh, that one sounds great, or this one sounds shitty or whatever. And so every person hits the drums differently. So there's always kind of like some snare that'll work for them or in some tuning. So you have to choose the right drums. Yeah. That's the biggest thing.
And you're saying you don't really know until you hear them play the drums.
You have I have a good idea, I could narrow it down if I needed to, but it's different for what I would play versus someone else. Like we'll deliver the stick on the head two different ways. So what I could make sound good, somebody else could not sound good. So you have to just audition these things and then make decisions on that. Like basically go ahead.
Well, is one of the things that we are likely to discover that the sustain of each drum is shorter than we think it is, needs to be shorter than we expected. Like in quicker sounding drum.
In fast music, if you're playing fast music, definitely sustain is not your friend. You want more of like an impact and then it just to get out of the way. So you can either tune the drums the way you want to try to get that, tape them up, to make the sustain go down. And then obviously when you're mixing, I just mute if it's not being played, it's muted. Like,
Right.
I only, it's like, you don't have to use gates anymore. You can just mute the whole track and just cut open the little bits that you want.
So, so if you have kicks and snares going back and forth, you might actually go into the kick and clean up in between kick hits where the snare's happening, and then clean up the snare track.
It's more so for the toms that I'm talking about.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. To clean the toms up. Kicks and snares, not as much. You can kind of get away with gating for that. Sometimes depending on the player and how hard he hit the cymbals and whatnot, you may have to go through and sort of clean up the middle stuff if it's like really bad. But if it's really that bad, then you're getting into like, I'm just going to use a drum replacement program. And
right.
like I would have never done this in the past, and I would just felt weird about it. But now I don't care, because I'm just like, I just want the record to sound good.
Yeah.
Like,
and it turns out most bands also want that,
They also want that too. And they don't care if you like, hey, guess what? I replaced your snare drum with a computer. And like, they're like, oh, really? Sounds cool. Like, but the worse the recording, the more that's when you're getting into these other tools of that work so well, you can't even tell. Like the program that we made.
Yeah.
Well, or there's a million of them that's
cool.
Made,
that's
but,
cool.
You know
what
I mean?
Check that one out.
Yeah.
And I don't find myself doing a lot of high speed drum stuff, but I definitely find myself trying to make drums sound good that didn't sound good as they went down.
Right.
And a lot of times that is a combination of things. It might just be the fact that it happened so quickly. There's just no way to know until it's already recorded and you're playing it back. And, so knowing what kind of tricks really help bring out a better sound out of a drum recording that just didn't happen the way you wish it did.
Right.
It's really helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the things that we learned from Andy Wallace, was the way he dealt with the overhead situation. Yeah. Like, so essentially, like if you have a kick and a snare and toms and overheads, and you mute the overheads and you're just left with the close mics, you can sort of EQ those any way you want for the most part and get those things to be punchy as all hell. But when you turn the overhead mics up, then you're like, oh yeah, they were in a bad room, or whatever. Right. You can't hide that anymore. So he would get the kick and snare and toms to be really punchy. He would EQ them and compress them. So they were just bum, bum, bum. They were like, real drum machine sounding things. And then he would put the overhead mics up to a level to where they weren't ruining like this clarity that he had created. There. Right. Yeah. And so then he had the fun job of automating every cymbal hit. Like, so because you've turned the overheads down too far, because the overhead mics are ruining your drum sound, like sometimes, not all the time, right?
So when you say cymbal, you're talking about crashes and things like
that. Crashes mostly, right? So, he would, put the overheads where like it didn't ruin his drum set, and then he would mix the album, and it's sort of close to the end of the process. He would go back in and automate every single cymbal hit, up 5 to 10 dB. Boosh. Boosh, so you could hear him. And if you listen to any of his recordings, the cymbals are crystal clear, and they're often loud. Like, and you're like, how come I can't get mine that loud? It's like, because you have to, you can't have them that loud all the time, So that's one of the tricks that we learned from him way back when. Like, and it's a way to deal with phase too, because if you turn the overheads down, there is no phase.
Right.
Like, there's no phase relationship with the snare drum if you don't have the overhead loud enough. Yeah. So that's definitely a way to deal with it. It's just turn things up and down where you need them. They don't just need to be on like the whole time.
And, you make a good point, which is the phase issue is only an issue when it's two things that are equally loud enough to each other that they're now mathematically canceling each other out. So when you turn something down enough, the phase issue goes away. Or if you do the opposite and you turn it way up, the phase issue goes away.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So that's one way to deal with, like, because most poor recordings are like, they're picking up too much of a poor room.
Yeah.
Or there's like phase issues. Like, that's kind of like two big things, other than like recording the wrong drums or the
And also
being
the other
bad.
cool thing that you're reminding us of is the power of just adjusting levels and automation, because that has nothing to do with EQ. It has nothing to do with compression. It's just make something loud enough to hear it when you need to hear it, turn it down when you don't.
Exactly.
And, you know, that goes into all kinds of usefulness
everything
in instruments.
Everything in mixing is automation. It's like, basically, it's like, if there's something cool being played, turn that part up.
Right.
You know, if it's not cool, turn it down. Like, you're always like trying to find the little moment of the song where it's like, whoa, did you hear what he played right there? Bam, turn that up, and everybody's head goes, whoa, that's cool. And then you're back to the song. Like, you're trying to create these moments of like coolness, not just like kind of a static, boring mix where somebody could be kicking ass, but you don't know. You're not focusing in when you need to. And you don't need to hear everybody's part 100% all the time. Just find the good stuff and
find the good stuff. Yeah. And hopefully as you learn the song and stuff, especially if you performed it, you sort of have where a lot of the good things are.
Oh yeah.
And when they start hiding. And the other thing is like, that is also where, mixing with a mouse begins to suck a bit, whereas like with the fader, you just go, I hear it. Now I
exactly.
don't.
Yeah, exactly. It's much easier to automate with the fader than it is with the mouse. You can be more accurate probably with the mouse, but it just like the inspiration is like half of it's the inspiration. It's like, oh, that's cool. Let's go. Let's turn it up. And just do it like when you think about it. But if you have to think about anything too long, it's like, you just lose it. You lose the inspiration, and then you start focusing on it too much, and then you start second guessing. And
well, and the mixing with the mouse thing, you typically have to move a line up to here first, and then press play, and then see if you liked it. Move it up, play, see if whereas with when you're performing it with the fader or something, you just push it up until it sounds where you want it, and then that's where
and I mean, you can always go back and
and
detail,
you usually do have to
detail it. But part of it though is like, you can make it a little too loud for a brief second and bring it back down, and no one will care. It's not going to be like, what the heck? It just kind of sounds natural. It's just like a little bit of like, whoa. But when you're doing like the mouse line, then everything's just perfect and nothing's like poking out. Like some of the greatest mixes are like, there's bad stuff happening, like, why did they make that so loud? Like, but if you're not focusing on that, it's like, that's cool. Like, it's just making you think. It's not, I don't know. It's just not so flat and boring.
Well, there's so many examples of that too. I mean,
the tambourine on every Beatles record.
Right. The tambourine on every Beatles record. I mean, Hotel California, isn't there, you hear the tape edit where the reverb just gets completely cut off
truncated.
Because that's where it happened. And one mix to another, I think.
Right.
But then those details become part of the experience. So as long as it feels great in the end, then people will wish, they'd miss it if you didn't do it.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Do you feel like the time that you've spent watching YouTube videos, trying out mix tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes has gotten you nowhere? Have you been looking for more of a simple and straightforward step-by-step process for creating a pro mix that won't take years to learn? What if you could have a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all of your struggles and could coach you through them? If you struggle with any of these questions, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is just for you. Now you can discover the proven step-by-step mixing system from Grammy-winning mix engineer Craig Alvin for consistently creating a pro-quality mix in your home studio that will sound great everywhere. Listen to this quote from one of our students, David. That was absolutely the most helpful and informative block of information and mentoring on the mixing process that I have ever been a part of. That was like sitting behind a mix engineer for years, watching and picking up pro tips along the way, condensed into a 6 to 7 hour session. Look, I'm so confident that this will help you take your mixes to the next level, that if you can't get a killer mix in 30 days, I'll give you a refund, no questions asked. So if you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go to ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and start now by checking out the free preview of the Ultimate Snare Mixing Trick. And hopefully I'll see you in the front row of the Grammys. So we've got a great sounding drum kit. Any did we talk about how you would have mic'd some of the mics you might have chosen for
a drum
drums?
set?
Yeah.
For the kicks and the toms, I like to use the Audio-Technica ATM 25. That's sort of my favorite for those. Snare drum is just usually a 57, although I've gone through every variety of dynamic or condenser, but like generally it's a 57. The bottom snare mic, it's usually a condenser that's a little bit brighter. And Shure SM81 works pretty well. A Josephson C42 is nice.
That's the side address that Albini used for the toms a lot too.
No, that's the E22. Yeah,
which is a great mic.
That's an amazing mic. The C42 is like the little pencil. It's a little pencil condenser. It's really bright and clear.
Oh yeah, I know that one.
Yeah, so that works good on the bottom. The overheads are, God, they could be just so many different things.
Let's assume that the cymbals are challenging in this situation.
If they're challenging, I'd probably spot mic them then. So individually mic each cymbal as opposed to like using a high up overhead pair. There's a company called.
Would you use a ribbon or something like that?
No. I like to use the Chameleon Labs TS1s a lot for spot miking. They were like a fairly inexpensive pencil tube mic that sound really nice, and they're not too bright, they're not too thin. They just sound natural. Those work really well to spot mic cymbals.
And what's the benefit of spot miking is you sort of have individual control over each cymbal.
Control.
Yeah.
The faster it is, the more control you need, essentially. And also, if you spot mic them, you're sort of taking the room sound out of the recorded drum sound, and so you get more impact and just more general clarity and tightness. This is for things that are moving quickly. It's yeah.
And how would you position the mic for a spot mic on a cymbal? Is it looking down above?
Over the bell of the cymbal, probably a foot, maybe a foot to 2 feet high, depending on how hard he played.
The center of the cymbal then.
Over the bell, yeah. That's generally where I would, if I was close miking it.
Okay, cool. Wow. I'm glad I asked those questions. Those are specific answers.
Yeah. Hi-hat and ride, probably Shure SM81s.
Yeah.
The ride's challenging because oftentimes the guy will have a crash cymbal right over the ride. And so you have to find a spot to mic the ride where the ride mic isn't closer to the cymbal than the mic that's miking the cymbal.
Do you ever find that underneath the ride is the place for it?
That can work for sure. Requires like a little bit more EQ because you pick up some kind of like kick drum sounds more, but that definitely helps out sometimes. And it's not, I think it sounds better on top, but if we're just trying to make it so it's not picking up that other crash, then underneath will work. But then also sometimes you just put it where you think it sounds the best, and then you have to have a giant automation party when you mix.
Right.
Like if he's not playing the ride, it's turned down 10 dB. And when he does play the ride, you turn it up when it's being used, kind of thing.
Yeah, that was another tip I remember hearing. Again, it was David Thoner. He was talking about actually for those about to rock, and he said, because I was asking him about the toms, and he said he wasn't using gates. He said you put the toms down in there so that they sounded good, blended in with the kit, and then you just
turn them up.
Faders, just turn them up on every tom hit.
Right. Yeah, no, that's probably a better way to go than just the way I do it.
I know what you mean. I mean, that's the way I do it too. And I
just mute them completely because it's so much easier now with the computer.
Yeah.
Back when I mixed on the console, I would either do it that way or the SSL actually had mute. It's got mute automation too. So you would mute the toms, and then when you played, you'd have to I missed it. Rewind. Right. Do it like that, or just open it up early and then feather them in and out. But yeah, that's because sometimes the toms have nice leakage that add to the to the vibe of the song, depending on how fast the song is.
Right,
you know?
and the music and everything.
Yeah, it's like it's hard.
I don't think For Those About to Rock was a high speed number.
No, that's a low speed number. Yeah. And he probably never played the toms. Like, how many toms does an AC/DC song have?
I don't know. Maybe that's why it was easy
Like,
to ride him up.
Yeah, probably. There's not that many toms.
You didn't even need help from the assistant for that one. Okay, cool. So let's see. What about things like recording the guitars and bass? I mean, I'm guessing guitars and bass are also pretty important on
Oh yeah,
records
absolutely.
like that.
So if we're just gonna make like kind of a blanket, like just here's my cookie cutter setup for a punk rock thing, it would probably be a Les Paul, and then I would have 2 or more amplifiers set up that were being captured at the same time, generally like a Marshall 800 or Marshall 900, and then like maybe a Mesa Boogie dual rectifier.
Yeah.
So something that's kind of like lower gain and something that's real high gain. Send them out to a couple cabinets. I mean, I've gone crazy and had 6 going at a time or something, but like two generally works. One obviously works too, but I just like the way that 2 you can kind of get a different sound.
Yeah. And then is that 2 in mono together, or is that 2 that might be
2 in mono? Yeah. So essentially that is just the sound is those 2 combined together. Like if I was doing it to tape, I would print those 2 to 1 channel, and that would be that. But in the computer, you don't have to do that. So you can print everything. So I would do that probably using like a 57 on each, but also maybe a ribbon, maybe a condenser of some sort, like an M160 or an R121, or actually AEA's N22 mic, their ribbon. I like that mic a lot too for guitars. So I'll use those. 10 years ago, I spent a lot of time tuning guitars, a lot of time. Yeah. That was sort of like part of our, like, making records sound, professional and good, was making sure the guitars were in tune.
Yeah. I don't know if this is the same style of music. Well, you mentioned Kurt Ballou, and I think we talked about the Evertune bridge.
Yes. So that's what I was getting to. So we switched to Evertunes. I think it was in like 2012 or maybe 2012. Yeah, a band that we record a lot is called Rise Against, and the guitar player is Zach Blair. He knew the owner, Cosmo, and so he got Cosmo to hook us up with a bunch of bridges and install them and all. And this is no joke, no lie. Like, normally, if I was making a month-long record, I would spend 10 days tracking guitar, right? 10 days.
Wow.
Got the Evertune, did the same band the next year, 4 days.
Wow.
4 days.
It's just because you have to keep tuning and retuning.
You have to keep tuning and retuning. I mean, there's the tuning, but then there's also the playing, which is probably more than the tuning. So when you're using the Evertune, you can mash your finger into the string or pull the string or slightly misfret it, and it's still in tune. So you don't have to be as good of a guitar player, essentially, is what happens.
But you can't do any blues bends.
You can if you put it into bend mode. It doesn't react quite the same as a normal guitar. It's like you have to try harder, but you can do that. So, but generally, like if somebody plays with a lot of expression, a lot of feeling, the Evertune's not for them. But like for punk rock, or you're just playing power chords and rhythm chords and whatnot, like, it's a godsend. Like,
what about solos as well? Is it
solos?
Good for solos too?
It's not good for solo. Like a regular guitar is better because you're doing a lot of bends. But sometimes, like when you're doing a solo, you're only bending like the B string and the G string, and that's it. So you can put those into bend mode, and you can bend those and leave the others in lockdown mode. Yeah. So you can do it. It's just a little bit more work.
This is fascinating. I've never used one of those, but I've certainly heard about them here on the show, and I've definitely put in my time tuning guitars. I mean, I've still got my Peterson strobe tuner with the dying light in it.
Yeah, that's how we started. Where you have to You have to change the notes.
Well, I have to
on
change the
thing.
notes, and I have to manually tune it before I even go with a pitchfork. Bang an A 440
damn.
on it and hold it to the thing.
Right.
Like,
and dial it in.
tune the fine tuner and get it ready.
Yeah.
But
our first Peterson
it really
was from
gets things in tune.
Oh yeah, the Petersons was the way to go. Yeah, and then when we would record bass before all that, we would take the Peterson and set it up so the bass would be like 10 to 15 cents flat when you tuned it, right? Because when you're a punk rocker, you're playing too hard, and every time you hit the string, it goes sharp. So the bass is always sharp.
Yeah.
So to combat that, you would just like have the guy play, hey, just play an open note, play your, whatever. Ding, 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 ding. And you could see how sharp he was. Okay, yeah, you're riding about 18 cents sharp most of the time on average. So we're going to tune the whole bass flat, 18 cents.
Right.
And that was your starting point. You'd have to go back to even when on a sustained note at the end of the song or something,
right.
Because you didn't want, flat sucks. Because it'll go back to flat after. But if you're just sitting there banging on it the whole time, it's never in tune. It's always sharp. So
now let's talk about why tuning even matters. So, I mean, if an instrument's slightly, as long as it sounds in tune with itself, the instrument alone will sound in tune. But it's like when you're layering against the other guitars, distortion sort of enhances that. I feel
it ramps it up. It ramps it up. I don't know exactly why it matters, but it gives you a feeling of uneasiness. It's like you're never like really settled into, I'm enjoying this. I mean, it's punk, so I don't know if you're like ever going to be settled in, but just in general, let's say, it's like there's something that's off. Your brain is like, what is off? What's wrong? Or, or like, even like with the vocalist, he could have sang great, but he's like harmonizing with the bass, and the bass is 20 cents sharp, and what's happening? It's just,
and it's not that our brain knows what a perfect A440 is. I think it's more that our brain hears the relationship of all these things. In the mix.
Yeah, and obviously
especially layers of guitars,
Yeah, and they're just kind of like hanging out, da 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 da, like just kind of like, oh god, like.
I remember, discovering that the bass was out of tune. It was like this light bulb moment. It's like, we checked it, and then I tune it, and then we play it back, and it's like, oh my god, that feels so much better.
The bass is always out of tune, and that's sort of like the thing that people are like the least likely to care about in a way,
Yeah.
But it matters so much. It matters so much. Yeah. So between like the Evertunes and tuning the bass flat, or now it's like you don't even really have to.
So they don't do the
bass.
Evertune for the bass too?
They just made one, which I haven't tried yet, but the one that they had like 10 years ago didn't work that well.
Right.
Because the way the Evertune works, it works on like a system of springs. So it's like a tension thing, right? So it holds a tension to keep a certain pitch. And with the bass, I don't know if they had the spring at the proper. It didn't have the. I don't know. It wasn't strong enough.
It's probably too big
or
of a
something.
spring. It's one of those springs where it's like, don't touch it. It'll rip your face off.
Or whatever, right? But then the guys who got into the Evertune more were the metal dudes. So they started making, baritone versions, or the metal guys are just radically detuning.
Right.
So I think the Evertune guys probably adapted a thicker spring system, so they probably got the bass thing figured out now.
That's fascinating.
But then you can always, like, the thing is now you just slap auto tune on the bass DI, and then you can reamp it after the fact. Like.
Yeah, I've gone through a bass track note by note and used the pitch plugin, Audio Suite pitch plugin in Pro Tools without the time correction, because it was the most coherent sound. But then it would make all the notes shorter or longer, and so you're like trying to reassemble the bass part.
We would do that with the Very Speed, like back in the early 2000s before they had auto-tune plugins. That's how you do it. You put Very Speed on the track just for the bass.
Work.
Oh, it was radically time consuming.
Yeah.
It was horrible.
Yeah. For 15 years, I had a famous MCI console at my studio that originally came from Criteria Studio C in Miami, where it made some of the most iconic Grammy-winning records of the 1970s. And it sounded incredible. When I was ready to upgrade my studio to a full digital mixing setup, I teamed up with Rick Carson at Make Believe Studio, Metric Halo, and Golden Ear producer Bill Simzik to recreate the legendary MCI console as the new MBSI plugin. The MBSI captures the same iconic sound used on multi-million selling records like Hotel California for the Eagles, Saturday Night Fever and Staying Alive for the Bee Gees, I Shot the Sheriff for Eric Clapton, We're an American Band for Grand Funk Railroad, and the soundtrack to Grease, the movie, all for legendary producers like Tom Dowd, Todd Rundgren, and Bill Simzik. The MBSI plugin not only delivers the authentic sound of the original MCI console faithfully, but it also adds new features like a top-notch compressor, overdrive, and a dual EQ filter switch, adding tools that Bill Simzik said he would have loved to have in the original console. Now you too can get that Grammy-winning MCI sound in your home studio. Whether you're recording or mixing, you can experience the sound of Miami 1976 with the MBSI plugin and soak up a little sunshine in your sound at makebelievestudio.com/MBSI. Okay, cool. So let's see. And then when it comes to things like vocals, are there vocal mics we should be thinking about as possible go-tos?
I mean, the
punk rock band.
Yeah, the SM7 is like, it's going to work. Well, it's going to work 100% of the time, but it actually might be the right mic 80% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
As far as like just a standard stock. We end up using, there's a company called 80K who's been around since like the late 90s, who started out making kind of cheaper mics, and now they actually make good mics. And they have a range called the Z mics, which we own a bunch of, and the Z12, which is like their copy of a C12. That mic, it's like that mic or the SM7, between those two will work for anyone. For us, I mean, we have a
C12. Don't people typically think of that as a bright mic? And is it?
It is bright, but like sometimes, like when you're yelling, when guys are yelling, there's no top end. It's only mid range, right? It's just like, so you just got like this 400 to 800 hertz. Just that's all you can hear. There's no articulation. So a mic like a C12 is scooped. It's just gonna dip all that mid-range out, and then they're just going to sound like a normal human again.
That's fascinating. Yeah. So, and then how often do you have a woman, a female singer or vocalist doing that kind of thing? And does that even happen?
No, I mean, like now we're sort of like, well, music and trends and genres have changed in the last, they're always changing.
Yeah.
But so at the studio, we're doing a lot more of just not punk rock music now, like just all kinds of stuff. So we do record a lot of females.
Yeah.
And they're just, like everybody else, like you have to throw up different mics and see what happens. Sometimes like a very, very bright microphone will sound fantastic and airy, like a 251.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it'll just sound horrible, and you got to use like an 87 or dark mic, or even, the SM7 works great on everything.
Yeah, we took the SM7 down to Bonnaroo to my studio every time.
Yeah.
And so that was my experience of learning. Like, it's a great all around mic. It just, everybody brings everybody to the middle sounding.
Yeah, exactly. It's always going to work. Some people are going to sound fantastic on it. And some people, like, there's a better choice, but it always works. It never sounds bad.
Yeah.
Whereas like, take an 87 could sound like God's gift on somebody, and then somebody else, you just like this, like,
right.
Just there's no articulation. It's all mids. That's why you have more than one mic.
That's awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, so let's see. What else do I want to ask you in here? What about pre-production? How much of the process is pre-production for you with the band, and how important is that for bands playing together in the studio?
Right. Pre-production used to be kind of a more involved process than it is now, because I don't think people had access to proper demoing equipment, 15, 20 years ago. So
Meaning today they can have a home studio so they can have a clue.
Yeah, meaning now, like anytime you get a record like to do, somebody in the band has recording software and they're doing their own demos. So they're sending you these demos and you can like go, hey, send me your demos. And then you can start, you can start working on their demos without the band being here. Like, oh, I could try making the song different tempos, or, we could cut things out here or there without the band being there. So you can kind of do pre-production from their demos. When they show up, if they're going to show up and do a full album and it's like a real serious thing, you may spend 2 to 5 days in the practice room.
Right.
Hashing all these things out and making sure the keys work and the tempos work and all that. But if it's a quick thing, if it's like, it seems like everything now is quick because there's no money in recording anymore. So it's like, give me your demos. We're going to track to the demos. I may change some things. We're going to replace most of the things from the demos, but we're going to use those as like a sort of starting point,
Yeah.
Where back in the day, the demos were on a 4-tracker and you didn't have any of that. So you had to start from ground zero.
Yeah. All right. Now you bring up a point. You're talking about things working fast. For me, fast sessions have been me getting a chance to go be a musician in the studio and then getting together with my friends. And, I sound check everybody at the beginning, but then mostly I'm just out there playing an instrument and, recording with a remote control laptop.
Right.
And I love doing that. And I love working quickly, but I've learned what it means to not have a trusted pair of ears as engineering or producing while you're recording yourself. And so it occurs to me as a drummer, that might be one of the more challenging instruments to record yourself on drums. Do you get a chance to do that some? And have you learned anything about how to effectively mic yourself up and record yourself on drums if you can't also be in the control room dialing it in at the same time?
I do it the same way I would do it with any other drummer, but I have to run back and forth more. I'll go out there and just kind of blindly set some levels and go on play and go, okay, I got to turn this up. I got to turn that down. Like I'm clipping this, go back in and I'll do it again. Then I'll start, then I'll have to play it back and go, did I get the phase? And I'll put trim plugins on stuff and go, oh no, I got to flip the phase on this mic and hit it on the pre's. And it's just the same way I would do it normally, but I have to just run back and forth. Like
it keeps you young.
Yeah. That's kind of funny. Cause like maybe like 10 years ago, I was like on a diet thing and I had a Fitbit on to try to lose weight, to figure out how many calories I was burning. And any of the days where I had to do like a setup for a recording, I would burn like 1,000 more calories that day, hands down. Just like really, I didn't feel like I did anything. But then you look back and you're like, I'm just up and down, running back and forth to the recording room all day long.
I feel like that's what we signed up for when we first started engineering too. And then the career path hands you this computer and it's like, nope, we're going to sit you down in a chair with your elbows locked at your side, clicking a mouse. Stuff becomes
it's a different experience.
Yeah. We're like frogs boiling slowly in the control room.
I know. Right.
And then what about stuff like headphones for you guys there? How important is the EQ system and headphones and what works really well for you?
So we have the Furman. There's like I don't know the number.
The old school with like the 4-channel or whatever.
And we got a bigger 16. One. We got the big one.
Yeah.
So it's got 4 stereos and 8 monos. The 8 monos have pans and EQs and talkbacks and all that stuff. So essentially you just, send people like whatever they need and label it: kick, snare, rack, floor, overheads, bass, guitars.
Yeah.
Everything.
But it's an analog headphone mixer, right?
It's an analog headphone mixer. Yeah. And I will definitely try to go out when I'm recording someone and get a headphone blend that works for me. Cause if I know when I'm playing and the headphones aren't right, I become lost and I can't figure out like what's wrong.
Yeah.
But a lot of times guys who aren't in the studio all the time, they don't know what sounds good or what doesn't. And
Yeah.
they won't tell you that they're lost. And, you'll just be like, I don't know if that guy can hear very well. Like they're just not comfortable. It's like, so I'll definitely, try to do that. Get the phones dialed in for people beforehand. So it's not just like click track all the way up to 50 for the drummers.
Right. Yeah. It's a little bit like asking the band if they are getting hungry yet and maybe want to order something. Like nobody ever wants to be the one to say, everybody's like, oh, no, I'm good. I ate a big
fine,
breakfast,
but you should have eaten 2 hours ago.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Okay, cool, man. Well, let's see. I got a couple more questions for you, and then we're done. Let me ask you this one. So what tip do you want to give us for as somebody who's run a studio that, has been booked well and is still running, you've expanded it, all that. What tip or resource do you want to share with the rock stars about the sort of the business side of keeping a studio operating and doing well, whether it's just, how to interact with people or, some favorite web tool or anything you want.
Right. Yeah. I would say try to keep your overhead as low as possible.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why I feel like there haven't been many storms in our careers. So I feel like we're fortunate, we've sort of just changed streams a little bit, but the building that we've been in, the rent has always been so low that that's possible. So we haven't been like stressed per se for that need. We've made purchases that we didn't need to make and paid them off too. But, a lot of times it's like you buy things because you're bored and you want to keep yourself fresh and interested, but maybe you didn't need to. So
well, it probably feels better to overspend because you got some cool gear for the studio than to overspend because the rent is killing you.
That too, for sure. But like trying to just manage depending on where you're at in your career or how much money you're making to not overspend,
Yeah.
Don't put too much stress on yourself.
That for me, that was a big motivator for doing a home studio kind of setup.
Right.
I've even had somebody else compliment me on that, saying like, I made the right move because studios can disappear around me, but I can keep going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. And then, this one is a hypothetical question, but this one is, I like to ask all the guests. We get to go back in time and we can take the Wayback Studio machine.
Right.
And you go back and you find young Jason, and you say,
don't do it. Don't do it.
You say, listen, dude, you'll learn how to tune your drums one day. But meanwhile, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. What advice do you want to go back and give yourself?
So in 2008, when Bitcoin gets invented, you need to buy some way back then. So now we could be on a beach somewhere.
Would we do that? Would we really do that? We
wouldn't do it. No, we wouldn't do it. We'd be
doing the exact same thing.
But then when we got older and we didn't want to be in the studio as much, then we would do. What would I give myself?
Yes, dear, we can go to the beach.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what we want to be able to say.
Yeah. I want less stress. I think trying to find people that are better than you and surround yourself with them. Like all the ways that I've learned the most in recording has always been from like when I got to work with like Andy Wallace or Chris Lord-Alge or Jack Joseph Puig or Al Beanie or any of those. All of those have been moments where I'm like, oh, dude, and then I go home and I implement whatever I've watched them do. And it's like my recordings or mixings got 30% better overnight.
Wow.
As opposed to like when you start and you're like, how do you do this? I don't know. Let's read a book. Let's go on Gear Sluts or, whatever, like that
the
kind
guy
of thing.
At the music store said.
Just that. I mean, and I'm all for like experimentation. I've spent a lot of time experimenting. It's a great way to learn. It's a fantastic way to learn, because you figure things out on your own. But if you can, and I know there's all kinds of different ways to do this now, but book yourself a session with like one of the best in the industry. Like have him mix a song and sit in, or have him record a song if you can get it. You'll learn a ton from people that are better than you. That
it's good advice, and it's something, it inspires me to even think that, for any of us, if we're also making our own music or want to make more of our own music, a first inclination might be to think, okay, well, I've got a studio, so I could just bring the band in. But how cool would it be to just simply say, you know what, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to actually take the band over to this other studio and we'll work with so-and-so.
Yeah.
Just for that very thing you're describing, where it's like, if
you're in it for if you're in it for your engineering chops and this is like a job to you, like, sure, you can record and get cheaply done, but like you pay, however much it costs to watch some expert do it. All that knowledge that you get from that it's so worth it.
Yeah.
So where it helps you, because there's a lot of stuff that's hard to figure out on your own, and you're just sitting there like in your own bubble, guessing. Like, I wonder if this guy does this. How does he do that?
Right.
And they can tell you, but it still doesn't sit in. But when you watch somebody do something, like, oh wow, that's all he did.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Oh, I got to try that.
So Rockstars, that means you need to go out to Fort Collins and
That's
go
right.
book
Come
the
make a record.
blasting room.
Yeah.
With Jason, so you can actually understand what he's talking about.
Exactly.
Dude, well, it's great to hang with you. Let the Rockstars know where they could find out more about you. What if they're ready to just come make a great sounding record? What do they do?
Yeah. So my studio is called The Blasting Room. We're on Facebook and Instagram. The Blasting Room Studios, I believe. I'm not 100% there on that.
I'll confirm.
And then I've got a personal Instagram, Jason Livermore, and a Facebook as well.
Instagram is just The Blasting Room.
Okay.
And the website's theblastingroom.com.
There you go.
Which actually, with my eyesight, it looked like The Blasting Groom.
Oh, The Blasting Groom.
The Blasting Groom.
Yeah.
Go make a record of The Blasting Groom.
I know. That would be a good time.
Yeah. And then, of course, we have links to all that in the show notes, Rockstars, and also Jason's playlist. So please go listen to these awesome sounding records. Go crank them up, because I think they were meant to be cranked up.
Yes.
Dude,
awesome.
It's great to hang with you, man. I look forward to meeting you in person.
Yeah.
And hopefully I'll be out in Colorado at some point.
Next time you get caught in a snowstorm.
Next time I get caught in a snowstorm.
Yeah.
All right, dude. Thanks for joining us, Rockstars. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our awesome sponsors who help make this episode possible: Isotope, Native Instruments, Roswell Pro Audio, and Atom Audio. And remember to take advantage of our special coupon codes. At isotope.com and nativeinstruments.com, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, please check out our sponsors using the links in our show notes. These are all things that I highly recommend for your studio because they're going to help you make your best record ever. Also, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. This is new for us here, and it's a great way for you to help support this show, so I greatly appreciate it. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko and Liz Hulitskaya. Thanks so much for watching and for listening. My name is Lid Shaw, and I'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.